Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Southern Outdoorsman Podcast, coming at you with another Thursday breakdown here with the Ginger Gunslinger. Jacob, how are you doing?
Doing well. And this week we had a unbelievable episode. But by the way, dude, how are you doing, man? You look a little sickly. Wearing a hoodie. It's 95 degrees outside.
Well, we're having problems with these cameras overheating, so the room is incredibly cold right now.
Ice cold.
It's
perfect weather for the Ginger Gunslinger. So. Love it. No, super excited. So this episode, this week we dropped a really exciting episode, kind of a roundtable where we had some absolute killers on the podcast. Starting with Jeremy Aaron from Do It Yourself Hunter on YouTube, Jonathan Moreland, who's a fan favorite podcast guest from Arkansas, Scott Seals from Alabama, who's been on the podcast quite a few times, and then Carl Brown and
Daniel Lemon
from Do It Yourself Hunter. So. It's just a crazy roundtable. And actually, you're going to hear Carl in an episode come up here in a couple weeks on the podcast. But, dude, it was just crazy. You had all these killers in one room, and we kind of talked all things really flatland and river bottom hunting for the most part. Just super fascinating. But what was your overall first impressions? Because, first off, they didn't see this behind the scenes, but we had dinner, kind of hung out with the boys. Cracked a few beers before we got started. And you were joking with them when we got started because – all their significant others were there. I mean, Jeremy's wife was there, Jonathan's girlfriend was there, and it's everybody's hanging out behind the cameras. You can't see them in the video. But
my in-laws were the Southern Outdoorsman support staff. They made steaks for everyone.
Yeah, cooked dinner. It was awesome. But it was funny because you brought up really early before we started recording. Hey guys. We got enough card space on these cameras in the recorder to go for 5 hours or something like that. And everyone was like, "What?"
Everyone was like, "Huh?"
Yeah.
I'm I don't think you understand.
Yeah, all the wives and girlfriends were like, "What are you talking about?"
Yeah.
I'm we're not necessarily going to go that long, but we could.
Tiffany knew. She was sitting in the back. She knew. She's like, "Yep, we're going to be here for a while."
Yeah, it's kind of fun because that was almost like a semi-live podcast because we had an audience the whole time. But I thought it turned out awesome. I mean, it was really cool to kind of get the dynamic with all these different guys kind of going back and forth. It made our jobs pretty easy because it was kind of fun to kind of open the conversation, letting everything roll. And it was they all had different thoughts on different aspects of, what makes them successful. And that's kind of dynamic.
That's exactly what I wanted to happen in this podcast, and that's pretty much what happened immediately. Jeremy just started asking Jonathan questions, and I just kicked back. I saw it in the video. I kicked back and I looked at you. I was like, "This is good."
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, there was a point when we were having dinner because we ate before we did the podcast, and they started asking some pretty good questions back and forth. I'm like, "Hold that! Don't stop! Save it for the podcast. Don't talk about that right now. I want your curiosity to come out on the podcast." And it really did. It turned out really good. And also, just as a point of note for all the listeners out there, you guys should go to YouTube. You can watch that video podcast, and I highly recommend it because the video podcast is really cool because you get to see the dynamic with everybody. Mm-hmm. And it just adds a different flavor to the podcast, which I really like. And this episode is on YouTube as well.
So and you might notice the studio has been spiced up just a little bit.
Just a little bit. Buddy Ryan Kirby hooked us up with both. Let me read them again.
We got the growth and maturity of the whitetail buck and the anatomy and physiology of the whitetail buck.
They're pretty sweet.
Yeah, they look good. I was very impressed how they look. I got to go up and tour Ryan's studio up in North Carolina, and oh my gosh. That place is awesome. That is so cool. You're getting to see where he does all his stuff and everything. He's got the setup, and we recorded a podcast which will be on his podcast feed called The Art of Hunting, and in that one we talk a lot about the Southern Outdoorsman actually, and kind of where we came from, and how this whole thing started, and kind of our story as a business and a podcast.
I need to listen to it because I want to see what kind of lies you put out there.
Well, I was talking some smack.
Oh man,
I was like, I'm the brains behind this whole operation.
Oh man,
but y'all can go check that out on his podcast feed. It should be out by the time this drops, I believe. So it's that one's on YouTube as well. He does filming. We talked a lot about filming these things. It is a whole nother thing trying to film a podcast, especially with multiple camera angles. That was another thing about this round table that all the guys got to see was us setting up all of our crap.
Lighting.
We brought in a whole truckload of stuff, and they're like, "Good grief, do y'all carry this around everywhere?" And we're like, Yes, we do. Yeah. Now we do actually.
Yeah. Full production team. You're looking at the production team right here.
Yep, that's right.
So, but no, it was really interesting. So, like right off the bat, we in the episode we really kind of hit hard with Jonathan, and Jonathan's been on the podcast a few times, but we really kind of dove even deeper on some of the feed tree aspects of like how he goes about paying attention to some of this. But anyways, we really kind of dove deep on the feed tree aspect with Jonathan, and it was kind of interesting. After having him on, also hearing him speak at the Mobile Hunters Expo with his seminar, there's things that he mentioned in this episode that we haven't really covered before. Mm-hmm. One thing that I thought was really interesting that he kind of mentioned pretty early on, he calls it that ice cream tree. Is like the ideal tree that he's looking for. And one thing that he's talked about, especially recently, both at the seminars but also on this episode, is when he went from hunting with a compound bow to now a traditional bow, whether he's using his long bow or a recurve. He's really significantly cut down his range that he can shoot. Where back then he would set up on a couple different feed trees where he can shoot 50, 60 yards and feel comfortable doing so. To now, he's wanting that deer, and he talks about all the time, I want that deer at 12 yards. He's like, I can shoot a little bit further, but I want him at 12 yards. 12 yards, he doesn't have a chance. He's going to get killed. And that it was just interesting because when he talked about his ice cream tree, and this is something I really wanted to kind of mention early on this podcast, is when he's hunting these areas of Arkansas, flat river bottom, there's a ton of different feed trees, and he's kind of talking about like what makes one tree better than the other in different species, and he mentioned persimmons, different oaks, along with the honey locust, which produces like a bean pod that we kind of talked about in the episode that the deer will eat as well. But that ice cream tree being the tree that's closest to that thick bedding cover, and it may not even have to have the most feed sign. But as long as it has some feed sign and buck sign close to it, that's the tree more than likely, based off his experience, and he talked about this in the episode, that's the tree that the big buck's going to come to first before he decides to feed out into the more of the open areas and feed under some other feed trees. And I thought that was just really interesting. And again, how he kind of scouts for those spots and kind of uses almost like an annual pattern on what trees have been hot and what trees he wants to kind of go back to year after year and check them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was a fun conversation, especially with Scott being there, because at the time we recorded this roundtable, we were like a week out from when we recorded with Scott on the Hill Country feed tree thing.
Yep.
And getting that dynamic was interesting, and it was fun hearing Jonathan talk about that, because that whole ice cream tree theory or whatever, to me, reminds me a lot of what Scott does.
Yep.
It's reminded me of what Scott's doing with like skinny little SMZs, hardwood bottoms in pine country, where like you were explaining to, I guess, was it Carl yesterday or no, it was the Mobile Hunter guys. Mm-hmm. You were explaining to them that in these SMZs there'll be like 2 oak trees, and maybe one of them's dropping, or maybe there's 2 dropping.
Yeah, but it's not like there's hundreds.
There's not like hundreds of trees there, and you're hunting like a very isolated tree, and you're just trying to find that right one. And Scott really talked about the same stuff. And another thing that they both talked about was finding a tree. Once you find the feed tree, you can go back to that feed tree year after year and check it. And it's like maybe every like 3rd year that tree is good. Yeah. And Jonathan also talked a little bit about, I believe, where he killed that really big buck. That tree hasn't been that great since. Like he keeps going back because he wants to hunt it, because he killed like how big was it? 180-inch deer there? Something like that.
Oh no, this is the public land deer. I don't know how big it was, but it's the what do you call that deer? I want to say Medusa, but it's not Medusa.
Really big buck.
It's a big crazy non-typical deer. But yeah, he's like, since he shot that deer in like 2016, 17, whatever, he's gone back every year. It's not been hot since.
Yep. But he keeps checking it because he knows that eventually it's gonna pop hot one of these years. Maybe it's this year. Who knows?
Maybe
it's overdue.
Yep, absolutely.
But once you know where they're at, you can return to them year after year and you can run that circuit exactly like what Scott was talking about on his episode. And I think Scott talked a little bit about it on this roundtable. But once you know where they're at, you can establish that circuit, and you can go and just check all these trees and be super efficient. Because like for me, I don't have like established feed trees that I know about that I can go check out. But over the years, as I start to learn new areas and I start building that I don't know, data log of where all these trees are, imagine how efficient you could be if you get 2 Saturdays in September before season opens and you just run that circuit of trees and you're like, okay, I'm going to go check this, and you go straight to the trees, see what they're doing, and then get out.
Yeah, and
that's your scouting.
And if you looked at like what Scott Seals is doing with that Hill Country episode we did, Hill Country feed trees, versus what Jonathan's doing, Scott has a lot. He has a lot of ground he's got to cover, but it's not like he's having to check thousands of trees.
Yeah.
Like, again, it's like each of those little SMGs will have a couple oaks you got to check. Versus like Jonathan, it's like, to me, Jonathan, it's almost like Scott mentioned in his episode, it's almost gotten easier because like you're going to very specific locations, checking very specific trees.
Yep.
And you don't have to necessarily wander around. Like you're walking up the SMZ, you're checking the trees, you're packing back out, going to the next SMZ, you just keep doing that little thing.
Mm-hmm.
Versus Jonathan, it's more like, to me, there's a little bit more of a wandering aspect of it.
Yeah.
Of like, where's the thick cover at? Like, where's these deer gonna be bedded out in these like river bottom kind of areas? And then, what are all the feed trees in that general area that they could potentially feed on? Within a couple hundred yards of that thick cover, and haven't checked all that. So, it maybe it's kind of like, if you think about it, in Scott's original episode we did with him, again on the hill country feed trees. He talked about when this piece of public land used to be a lot more upland hardwoods.
Yep.
And at that time, it was a lot more like you had to cover so much more ground in order to try to find the tree.
Yep.
Versus now it's not, and it's like Jonathan's kind of doing what Scott used to have to do, but doesn't have to do anymore because how the property sets up. So yeah, it's really interesting, that kind of dynamic, and he give tips that he's talked on the podcast before, but I always thought was interesting because him and Jeremy had a little kind of going back and forth on this with the persimmons and how attractive persimmons are, and he'll walk up and if the persimmon tree is hot and he's hunting the persimmon tree, and he's talking about persimmon trees like. When he was talking about big persimmon trees, like a big persimmon tree for me is probably like, I don't know, maybe like 12 inches diameter.
Yep.
And he's talking about finding some that are like 18 to 24 inches or bigger in diameter, which I've never seen one that big. Have you?
No, I found one at the club last weekend that was is probably one of the biggest persimmons I've ever found in Alabama, but it's probably about that big around.
Yeah, like 18, 19 inches in diameter.
Yeah. And it's got persimmons in it.
Oh, does it?
Oh, yeah. So
well, too bad the season won't open when they're dropping.
They're going to drop, and I'm not going to get to hunt it because we don't open until October 15th. We might open October 14th this year. I can't remember. But that whatever's third Saturday in October or second Saturday in October. But it will be a good camera spot.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely.
It'll be a great camera. And we got a camera on a creek crossing right next to it right now. But I think I was telling Mike that when it gets to be a little bit closer to maybe September, maybe late August, we'll go shift that camera onto that persimmon when it starts dropping, just to see who's in the neighborhood. You know, see what's coming through.
No, another thing with Scott, not with Scott, but with Jonathan. That actually is a little bit different from what Scott does, and even some of these other guys. He's talking about running trail cameras on these feed trees.
Yep.
And it seems like he's kind of putting some of these out, especially like in August, like right when, maybe, you might have a storm come through and knock out some persimmons or something like that. Like they're not quite dropping, but they're getting there.
Yep.
And having cameras strategically in different spots, again, close to some of that thick cover, that's on a good feature. He putting cameras out and then kind of check them every. What was he talking about? Every 7 days, roughly, is what he wanted to check them on.
I think so. Because you got to stay on top of the feed trees.
Yeah.
And that's another thing that Jonathan said. He said that some of these trees are going to be hot for like 20 days if you're lucky, and it's a really good tree. A lot of them aren't though. A lot of them just don't last that long. And so you got to be on top of it. Like you got to prioritize it and like be out there and get on top of those things. And that's what he's talking about with the trail cameras too. Is like you got to cross your T's and dot your I's when it comes to checking those and staying on top of them, because it might be hot today and the next Saturday. And that's the hard part about being a weekend warrior. Most of us can only hunt on Saturdays pretty much.
Yeah. And
you find one on Saturday. You come back the next Saturday and it's not hot anymore, and you got to relocate. But sometimes it is. Sometimes it is. So you just gotta go out there and check them, I guess.
Yeah, I go back to that one that you found in that around that Bluff Gap, and
I don't like to talk about it.
Yeah, Scott's like, "What are you doing, man?"
Scott's like, "Oh yeah, that's a spot where you'd kill a huge buck out there." That doesn't make me feel better.
Good to know. And also another thing that was this interesting dynamic is, just while we're talking about the feed trees, is Jonathan talking about, I think Carl Brown asked him, if you looked at all points of the season when you're killing a lot of your deer, especially on feed trees, what time of day is it? And Jonathan was absolutely the last 30 minutes of light. Like those evenings is like by far the best. And it's kind of interesting because, again, that's traditionally what we've heard. Like on feed trees, it's like it's an evening thing. And then, we've had Scott on in Hill Country, and he's talking about like he really likes those, getting in the morning, not, just after, gray light, or getting in gray light when the deer hopefully kind of ease back into, getting some of those pines and killing bucks early season mid-morning up until like maybe early afternoon, early season. But it kind of goes back to Jonathan and like where he's at. And again, traditionally, that flat country, it's like you don't know exactly where those deer are because there's so much feed trees, there's so much stuff everywhere. It's like you can't pinpoint like, oh, I know these deer, kind of like Scott's saying, I know these deer are going to be down these bottoms feeding up until right around Gray Lake, they're going to ease back in the woods. You can't really do it in the river bottoms where it's all flat, there's feed trees everywhere, there's thick cover kind of sporadic throughout the whole thing. And again, kind of going in the evenings just makes sense. But he mentioned, and this is something I was going to pitch over to you, about hunting those secondary trees in the morning.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, I'm not going to give up a morning hunt. If I have a morning to hunt in October, I'm not going to not go.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to go to that ice cream tree, like that top of the top tree, and potentially risk busting a buck out. But I'll go to a secondary tree, which is a tree that's still dropping. It's got good sign under it, but maybe it's not as prime of a location as that ice cream tree, and that's what he'll hunt on a morning hunt.
I could not love that anymore because it's like a wise use of your time. That's the main thing that's bothered me about people saying don't hunt early season mornings or like in October don't hunt mornings like at all. And I'm like, man, again, going back to the thing, if you only have Saturdays to hunt, like get out there, I mean, It doesn't matter because every year there's guys in Alabama and Georgia and Mississippi, wherever, Florida, that are killing big mature bucks early season bow hunting on feed trees. You kill them at 7 a.m. And it's possible. I mean, you can do it, but I really like having that strategy aspect to it where like, hey, I'm not going to go to the best of the best because it relates to what me and you do most of the time, especially when we're on a hunting trip and we're somewhere and we don't have anything to do except hunt. We've taken time to like, block off a couple days and we're going in before daylight and we're coming out either when we kill a deer or after dark, and you kind of hunt your way into spots. And whenever I've talked about this before, whenever I get a stretch of like 2 or 3 days when I can do that, I usually kill something. And you do too. Like I remember when you were in Arkansas last year and you shot that mature buck. I don't know what day you shot it on, but it was getting kind of late in the trip. Like you'd been out there for a while. I'm like, he's usually killed one by now. Yeah. And I was talking to Nick. I was like, he ought to call me like any time, And then you called me like later that morning that you'd kill that buck. But that's what I'm saying is like using your time efficiently and staying out there in the woods as much as you can. Because I think a secondary benefit of that would be you're out there in the woods and you're paying attention to what the deer are doing and just you're like tapping into like, I don't know, just like the mood of the woods. Not to sound weird or anything, but for real, like there's something to that. You're kind of understanding like, hey, what are the woods like today? Like, is everything moving? Is everything going crazy? Is it kind of like one of those sleepy days where nothing's going on, the birds aren't really chirping or whatever? And I mean, I don't know. I could go down a rabbit hole with that, but does that make sense?
Yeah, it's people talk about like finding a pattern, hunting a pattern. Trail cameras can show you a pattern, but it's showing you a very small window of what's happening around that tree your camera's on. The best pattern you can find is actually spending time in the woods and actually visually seeing or not seeing what deer are doing.
Yeah.
Because even if you're not seeing deer, but clearly they're not using this at this point. If you think you have the wind thermals right or your axis is good, clearly they're not in this spot. If I'm not seeing deer during prime time, so I need to keep moving, and that's as good of a pattern of even having your trail cameras out there. And to me, even more valuable because you can see more than what your trail camera can see when you're in an elevated position. And when you do have those compounding days where you have 2, 3, maybe 4 days you get a hunt, even if it's just in the mornings or just in the afternoons, maybe you can't hunt all day, you're going to learn so much in that window of time versus hunting one day this week and then one day next week,
and
then one day the following week. Like you're almost starting over every single time. And if you're doing that, that's where I think trail cameras really play a huge value because you're not in the woods, you can't see what's going on, so the trail cameras can kind of help you out, but it's still not showing you a whole picture of what's happening.
No, just giving you a little snapshot.
Yeah. So I think that's super, super important. Is just like it goes back to what a lot of guys say. Our buddy, Mike Perry talks about this all the time. One of the most important aspects of becoming a successful hunter is time in the woods, like time well spent. And to me, like all these guys are like that. I mean, Jonathan gets out in the woods as much as he possibly can with work and family and everything else. Scott's the same way. Jeremy's the same way. Daniel's the same way. Carl's the same way. All those guys try to spend as much time as possible in the woods. And by doing so, you're going to get into an opportunity to be able to, harvest a buck.
Yeah.
If you do that all season, you don't, Well, you need to analyze why are you not, again, going back to asking why are you not seeing deer? Why are you not having encounters? You know, what could it be? Could it be you're not paying attention to the wind, you're not paying attention to thermals, you're not paying attention to your access, or you're just flat out on the wrong spot?
Yeah, hunting the wrong sign.
There's like, kind of goes back to a future episode we've got with Carl Brown talking about hunting sign is some sign you can't see very well depending on like how the habitat is. And also the signs showing you where the deer was doesn't necessarily mean that's where he is. And it's like you got to take that in consideration as well. You know, if you're hunting a lot of big sign, and the more you look at it based off of where it's at, it's in more open woods. You're probably hunting nocturnal sign, night sign, and yeah, you could luck into potentially getting a buck there. But if you move closer to that thicker cover, getting closer to that potential bedding location, you have a lot better opportunity to catch him slipping during daylight instead of sitting on that really pretty sign or this crazy sign, and you're only catching that nighttime movement.
Yeah, what'd you think about the aspect of you got a trail camera out and you're waiting for a buck to daylight, and then by the time he daylights 2 or 3 times and you go in there to hunt him, he's done, he's moved on.
Yeah.
And so I think it was Jonathan talking about that, not getting so hung up on like, oh, is he daylighting yet? He's like, I just need him on camera.
I just need him on camera and know what direction he's coming from and going to. Absolutely.
And that's it. And then a lot of those guys are hunting the moon phase too.
Yeah,
based around that.
Yeah,
but the whole premise is like it doesn't matter what time that deer's coming through there. Like he's coming through there, I know where he's at, or I know that he's here and that he's using this area, and I'm not gonna sit around and wait for the one time he shows up in daylight and I'm not there. You know, I just got him on camera.
Well, again, I think some people think they have to kill a deer right where their camera's at, and that might not be the best spot to ambush them and actually hunt that deer. And it's kind of like what Jonathan's saying. It's like I don't care about killing deer at the camera, but if he's in the area and I can potentially backtrack him closer to where he's at and find a feed tree closer, like especially if he's coming out in the evenings and maybe it's an hour after dark. If I can find a feed tree that's closer in the direction that he came from, I've got a good opportunity to be able to hunt and kill that deer. And again, some areas you can do that in. Again, areas like what Scott's hunting in. Again, kind of hill country, highly managed pine plantations where there's not a lot of open timber, like up on the hills, like you're hunting these ditches and drainages. You might not be able to get as close as you actually need to if he's coming out at an hour after dark and he's just kind of hanging out in that pine thicket. But if you're in Jonathan's case, you're in a case where like you can make a move and get a little bit closer and a little bit closer. You know, it seems like that's what Jonathan was talking about. You know, he has that opportunity to, if he gets him on camera, move in a couple hundred yards close in the direction that deer came from, find a hot feed tree if there's one in that area, set up on it, and there's a good opportunity that maybe he doesn't shoot the deer, but he gets that opportunity at least putting eyes on that deer and then figuring out how he needs to adjust for the next hunt.
Yeah. If that right there trips your trigger, then you need to go listen to episode 122, Backtracking Bucks with Jeff Homan, because that's essentially what you're talking about there. What Jeff was doing is he's getting him on camera, and then he's moving that camera incrementally back to the direction that buck came from until he starts getting him in daylight. And if trail cameras are your thing and this subject interests you, then go back and listen to that one. That one's a classic.
The episode 122.
Yep.
Backtracking Bucks with Jeff Homan.
I think it's 122, right?
Look it up, bro. You got your phone there.
All right, let's see what we got.
But I mean, it's definitely a super valuable skill set if you can do that. You know, we've kind of messed around a little bit. I mean, even another guy kind of talked about it is a past guest, Josh Driver, episode 141. Kind of, if you listen to his episode, guys, he hunts a lot of hill country, and episode 141 is a really good one about trying to kill a buck early in the season and how he casts his cameras out in a very specific area with specific habitat type that has a specific kind of diversity he's looking for. And when he gets that buck on camera, at that point, he just sucks his cameras in to the area that he's getting that buck on camera and potentially even backtrack him a little bit closer to his bed until he gets him on camera, really not on just one camera, but multiple cameras in the same area in the same day. And that's when he has the opportunity to be able to kill that deer.
Yeah, it's episode 122.
So 122, Backtracking Bucks with Jeff
Second guess myself. Hey, man, there's a bunch of little golden nuggets back there in that time frame. Episode 116, 115, 122.
118 with Adrian Farley.
118.
Or 119.
141 with Josh Driver. Come on. Yeah, dude, y'all just zoom on back to 2019 and start listening. There are some really good ones.
Yeah.
That's why every once in a while we like to take one and repost it, so we'll probably do one of those.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
pretty soon.
If you're a newer listener, definitely I'd go start at episode 116 and start working your way up.
Yeah, definitely.
So
yeah, that we got a message the other day where I was like, "Hey, I've listened to every episode," and I was like, "I'm sorry for the first 110."
Yeah,
there were some good ones in there, but like I feel like we just got better at interviewing and figured out like how to actually get stuff out of people.
Yeah,
about that like 110, 115 mark. 116 with Glenn Solomon, ultimate classic of all time.
I was listening to an episode from 2020, and I was telling you this. It's back when our buddy Michael Pike was doing the podcast with us too, on sometimes on the interviews, but definitely on the outros. And in that interview, like that's when I was working my old job, and you're doing what you're doing now. And dude, we had like no energy. It was like if you listen,
we were probably recording it at 11:30 at night.
Yeah, if you listen to me talk, it's just like, is that even Jacob? Like it's oh my god, it was rough. I was like, man, I was. It sounded like I was dying, man, just trying to make it through that freaking episode. But you hear that.
A lot of late nights in the Southern Outdoorsman history,
yeah,
including this roundtable, by the way. Shout out to Jeremy and all those guys, because man, I don't know if they knew what they were in for, but I think they pulled out of the driveway about 11 or 1 a.m. or something like that.
Yeah, we didn't start until like 9 something, and it went for almost 3 hours.
Yeah.
And then even after the podcast, we sat around and talked.
Yeah, we couldn't stop talking, man.
Yeah, I was
you get a bunch of deer hunters in a room together. That's what happens. But that and also a lot of, for most of those guys, like our day, I think started at 7 a.m. because we were at the expo all day.
Yeah,
and we all left the expo and went straight to the house and did the podcast. So I mean, that was a long day for everybody there. But
that day, actually, we didn't talk about this, but I didn't eat all day long.
This is great.
And I had a little caffeine in the morning, and I drank. And I'm not sensitive to caffeine. Like, I could consume a lot of caffeine, and it's like, okay, it's no big deal.
Somewhat dangerous amount, probably.
But since I hadn't eaten all day, and I really hadn't drank much water because I was doing a lot of seminars, so I was busy with all that. At like 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I drank. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I drank a White Monster, which has I think like 200 milligrams of caffeine.
Big mistake.
Nothing crazy. Dude, I'm telling you.
Except that was like probably your third energy drink of the day.
Second.
Yeah.
But I thought, dude, I couldn't even like. I couldn't. I mean, kind of like now. I couldn't even speak really, and just I was sitting up there.
Your leg was twitching.
Yeah, I was sitting up there in one of the seminars, and dude, my right leg was just a freaking like just shaking. I'm like, bro, I am tweaking right now. This is terrible, man.
Somewhere out there's a video floating around of your leg tweaking out while you're trying to do the seminar.
I'll tell you, it was Michael Perry's episode is when it hit, or Mike Perry's seminar, and then when I did, it just kept getting worse. When I did Daniel and Jeremy's seminar, it was crazy, and it was like that all the way up until 6 o'clock whenever we get back to eat.
Oh my gosh. And we got back to the house, and you're like, do you think I should drink a Spark? I'm like, if you drink a Spark right now, you'll die.
Yeah.
I was like, you'll die. I was like, have a beer instead. You have too many uppers. Let's get you a downer.
Yeah. Oh, good. It was that was rowdy. But
I'm so glad you didn't drink a Spark. You would have. Oh my gosh, you would have been not available for that podcast.
Let's go to the ER real quick.
Yeah.
I need an IV drip bad. No, but again, kind of going back to the episode, like, I mean, it's just fun kind of having Jonathan on there with all these other guys. And, like, again, you know, Jeremy has experience feed tree hunting. Daniel's got experience feed tree hunting. Scott's, you know, that's all he does for the most part other than rut hunting is feed trees. And Carl messes around with it a little bit. So it was just kind of cool getting that dynamic. And then, like, the fun thing with the episode is just, like, the dynamic between all the different guests. Like, I mean, Carl asked a ton of questions. Mm-hmm. Scott asked a ton of questions. I mean, Jonathan was asking questions for Jeremy and everybody else, and then you know Jeremy was just asking all kinds of questions too. So it's a really cool dynamic having everybody on there.
It was fun watching a guy like Jeremy like ask so many questions intently, especially there at the beginning, because it's like, man, Jeremy, like he kills big deer, man. Like he's consistent on mature bucks, yet he's still in this room and he's asking all these other guys who are younger than him what they know and trying to learn. And I think that is not to be overlooked. You know, that's probably why he's killing all the mature bucks and he's so consistent, is because he's got that mindset and he's constantly trying to learn. So I respected the heck out of that, man. It was really cool to see. It was fun to see. I'm like, man, this is why we got all these people together, first of all. Because that was exactly what we were hoping would happen. We're like, y'all just start talking. Me and Jacob, it's going to be the easiest podcast ever. We're just going to sit back. and let y'all handle it.
Oh, dude, it was fun. I mean, it's just, again, it's cool because, like, everybody there is on a certain level when it comes to whitetail hunting. And it's like that whitetail IQ going back and forth is just, I mean, it's invaluable.
That's a term we need to coin, is whitetail IQ, because that's what I keep getting at when I keep making the analogy of, like, you go to like the expo or the people on the podcast.
Yeah, you go to the family barbecue.
Yeah, and it ain't like your uncle who's at Thanksgiving or at the family barbecue or whatever, who, you know, is like a very casual deer hunter. Mm-hmm. Again, nothing wrong with that. Not talking trash or anything, but like they're not looking at things the same way that we are. And and like that in that room, that's like a very high whitetail IQ in that room. Like those guys, like, they live and breathe it, and they're very good at it.
Yep.
And getting to see all of them talk, man, it was fun. Yeah. It was awesome.
Yeah, it's it was fascinating. And then, you know, another thing that I thought was hilarious, and we were talking about this is something we talked about later in the podcast, and I just remembered it, is how relevancy is so important when it comes to whitetail hunting. And what I mean by that is, like, I was telling Jonathan, I'm like, dude, you know, he's killed quite a few 125 plus inch deer, 130 plus inch deer.
Yep.
And it's like, I know so many people in, like, our home state who's hunted for years has never killed a 130 inch deer. Mm-hmm. Not saying they're bad hunters, just they've never had that opportunity really to kill a deer like that.
Yeah.
And you know, some of these guys are killing 150, 160 inch deer, and it's like, you know, depending on where you're at, you can't kill a 130 inch deer if you don't have a 130 inch deer on the landscape. You can't kill a 160 inch deer in an area that doesn't have a 160 inch deer. And Jonathan kind of brought that up about, like, you know, how, you know, everything that's being discussed and everybody's hunting style is relevant to the area and the deer they hunt in their general area. And that's, like, so important because, like, I don't want to have somebody on from, you know, North Florida or South Florida listening to the podcast and hearing these guys like Jeremy and Daniel and Scott and Jonathan and Carl, they're killing all these really good deer, and they're like, well, dude, I've never even seen a buck. I don't know anyone that's ever killed a 120 inch deer.
Yeah.
And it's like, that is so critical to understand. It's like, that's one thing I like about the Southeast. Like the Southeast, there are areas in the Southeast that there are some huge deer that get killed. But also one thing about like in the Southeast is, you know, if you're killing a nice buck, dude, if he's a 105 inch deer and he's a mature buck, 110 inch buck, that is awesome. Like, dude, don't look down that. Like, we got some guys coming down to hunt with us this year in January, and I told him, like, dude, if you have a 3.5-year-old come out and he's 100 inches, shoot him. Like, that's a good deer, man. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And but it's, you know, it's just different. Like when you hunt different areas that, you know, you could find a 3.5-year-old deer that's 130 inches.
Yeah.
Like that is so rare, I feel like, down here where we're at. It happens, but it's so rare compared to some other parts of the country. And also just like this tactics, because where I was trying to get with that is, so Carl they were talking about, I think it might have been Jonathan or Jeremy, one of those were talking about 120 inch deer. Like, 120 inch deer. He's like, they were talking about, you know, 120 inch deer. Like, one of them was talking about seeing a bunch of 120 inch deer.
Yeah.
And Carl's like, 120. He's like, man, that's a damn good deer where I come from.
Yeah.
He's like, you know, you're in the coastal plains of South Carolina. He's like, dude, 120 inch deer is a big deer. I'm like, I'm right there with you.
Legit big deer.
Like 120, 125 inch deer is an awesome buck. And that's how we kind of opened the conversation about, you know, just everything so relevant to like where you're at and who you're talking to.
Yeah. And I mean, that's like a lot of Alabama hunters that we talk to. It doesn't matter if it's, you know, my mentor, Benny George. Michael Perry.
Michael Perry is a great example.
Tony Myers is a pretty good example too, where if you go look at their wall, the top end of that wall is like 140-ish, you know, like some of their biggest bucks are going to be, well, not Michael Perry, obviously.
Not even Tony Myers. What are you talking about?
Like 140, 150 is like the absolute biggest.
He's got 170.
Well, I know.
Okay,
I'm saying.
Okay, so not necessarily them as an example, but sorry, keep going.
Yeah, I'm just saying. But if you go look at, it's not like he's got 18 170-inch deer in his house. Look at Michael Perry's wall. He's got like 5 or 6 like huge bucks. He's got obviously like a really big deer that he killed, state record buck a couple years ago.
Yep.
And he's got a couple others that are in that 150 range. But then the 30 other deer he has on his wall are what, 110 to 125 inches?
Yeah,
a lot of them.
They're all good deer. I mean, like when we talk about like a really good rack buck, like a great representation of the area, like to me, Michael's like one of the best examples. Like he's not the kind of guy. He's not going to go 6 years not shooting a buck because he's trying to kill that 150. Like if a good 3.5, and he talks about, he's like I'm looking for a 3.5-year-old buck or better. Okay, if it's a good 3.5-year-old buck or better, I'm going to shoot that deer.
Yep, exactly.
I'm taking that opportunity, and I really look at the guys like that. I'm like, dude, that's awesome, especially when you have the opportunities. To me, it's different. I feel like it's slightly different between if you're hunting public land, okay, and you have tens of thousands of acres to run around, maybe hundreds of thousand acres to hunt around on, and also in Alabama you get 3 buck tags. It's not like you have 100 acres and you don't want to shoot that 3.5-year-old because you really want them to get to 5 years old, and you're trying to shoot a 5.5-year-old buck on that property. It's a different dynamic.
Yeah.
But that's one thing. Like again, I look at Michael Perry that to me gets me excited when it comes to whitetail, and he's like, dude, he's killed all these big deer. And he'll still go kill like a nice 3.5 or 4.5-year-old buck and not feel bad about it.
Yeah, makes
it's
him
no
happy.
shame. Take a photo of the whole 9 yards, and I love that.
That's what I'm saying is that like Michael Perry is an upper echelon deer hunter in Alabama. Like he knows what he's doing and he's consistent with it. And you go look at his wall and what is realistically attainable.
Yeah.
Scott Seals, go look at his wall. What is realistically attainable in Alabama? Take it for Georgia, Mississippi, whatever. Go look at the best deer hunters that you know. Go look at their wall. I mean, and that's what you should expect and like be thrilled with, you know, because you can't take what some guy's shooting in Wisconsin and apply it to down here. You're like, man, I haven't killed a 150 yet.
Or
it's like, well,
or even in your own state, like give Mississippi an example. Some of those deer that are coming out of the Delta that are just giant whitetails, huge body,
Travis
huge
Murray.
Yeah, huge body. If you're in the northeast part of the state, you don't have that opportunity to kill deer like that unless you're traveling.
Yeah,
like it's just not. I mean, it could happen, but it's so much more rare than if you lived in that area where a 5.5-year-old could be 245 pounds and be 150 plus inch deer.
Yep.
So I mean, that's something you got to take into consideration. That's why we'll interview guys on the podcast that are killing really good deer, especially if they're killing mature bucks. They might never even kill a 130-inch deer, but they're killing mature bucks in their area and their part of the southeast, and that's still super valuable when it comes to information being shared.
Oh yeah.
So I wouldn't judge somebody 100% on how big of the bucks they're killing, but are they consistently killing good deer in your area? And to me, that's someone that I could look up as a mentor.
Yeah, 100%. No, I think that's a great subject, especially kind of going into late summer here. We're going to be having a lot of people with trail cameras out, kind of figuring out what's in their area. And that's another thing, too. Like, if you're starting in a new area, get those trail cameras out and see what's in the neighborhood. You know, see what kind of deer that you're actually dealing with. That's one thing I'm trying to figure out on the club right now. I don't have a deer on the club right now that just, like, fires me up, you know. But if it's later in the season, like if we get to the rut and it's, like, January or whatever, and I still got some buck tags left and one of these, like, decent 8 points comes by, he's going to be in trouble, for sure.
I want to read this real quick while we're talking about deer. So Dr. Deer just posted this on Facebook, and I'm really interested in finding more about this data. And he just posted there was a 50-year study confirmed that it was just completed. 50-year study that confirmed the average mature whitetail buck has 8 points and scores an average between 125 inches and 130 inches. That's true for both the north and the south. And he just kind of talks about like different areas, like some areas, like he gave an example in some areas of Mississippi where there's been heavily harvested for 8 points or better. The average for a mature buck is 6 points. And it also started talking about the percentage. Less than 15% of mature bucks broke 150 inches. Less than 1% broke 170 inches. And I'm like, that is super interesting to kind of hear and see that as a data point. Like, yes, you can kill a lot bigger deer, but if you're killing 120 to 130 inch deer anywhere, I think is awesome. But especially in the southeast, that is a really big accomplishment.
Yeah, I'd love to. I'm very curious about that study. I would love to see where that data actually came from and how they came to that. Because I wonder if that's like a nationwide average, and I don't know, maybe like the North is kind of pulling up the score a little bit.
Oh, interesting.
You know, like that average, because I don't know, like the average deer is 130 inches at 4.5, like even in the deep south. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know.
No, that's a good point. That is a very good point to think.
I mean,
about.
maybe like 120-ish. I could see that, like 115 to 120,
yeah.
at least like around here. But also part of that too, like if I don't know, depending on how that study strikes you, some of that also could be that most people are not very good at aging deer. You know, so a lot of people that think like, like how many times do you see like, oh, I killed this mature buck, and it's like definitely not mature. Mm-hmm. But you know, you're not going to be like, that's not a mature buck. You're not going to say that to him. But you know, I mean, most people are not that great at aging deer, frankly, which we did an episode on 2 months ago.
Yeah,
Mariah Bogus.
Yeah, Mariah Bogus, state biologist for North Carolina.
Talking about aging deer. Absolutely crushed everybody's disillusions on aging deer.
Yeah, and that's interesting. But it's like, I don't know, just like I just kind of go back to like it's relative to where you're at. Like I think Jonathan was talking about, and I think I've looked at this too. And guys from Florida, you can write and tell me if this is wrong. I think to get into the state record book for Florida, I think you got to break. It's like 100 inches or 110 inches, get you into the record book, which is. I mean, you think about it, it's crazy, but it's like you see some of the deer that are coming out from down there. It's like you kind of understand what's going on. Like, you know, some areas down there you have bigger body deer, but, you know, you have the chance to kill a mature buck that's 125 pounds, 130 pounds, 140 pounds. And, you know, first off, dude, you have a 110-inch deer walking around that's 130 pounds. Live weight?
Looks big.
He's going to look big.
Looks real big.
Yeah, he's going to look big, especially if he's got a little bit of whiff to him, dude. I'm like, oh, my God.
Giant!
Yeah. Oh, my God. It's hilarious. It's like I've heard guys – it might have been Rendell Eric I talked to. Somebody they'd gone to Kansas. It's somebody that this guy I talked to, he knew, went to Kansas and passed his buck. The buck body was so big, he thought it was like a small deer. And he took photos of it, and he's like, dude, that's a 150, 160-inch deer. But he's like, the
just weighs 300 pounds.
Yeah, the deer probably weighed 300-something pounds for real, live weight. And it's like, it just made his rack look small. Like, we don't have that issue in the South.
No, definitely.
It's
the
opposite, like, typically.
We get more bang for our buck down here.
Yeah. Like, them gripper grains look real good with the southern deer.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's hilarious.
But, you know, it's just fun. But kind of going back to this episode, I mean, dude, there's so many like good tidbits from this episode that, you know, you're getting from all these successful guys that are all kind of like sharing their own information, their own knowledge, and also kind of going back and forth in communication. It makes it really, really fun. And again, I highly recommend going and watch it on YouTube, just because to me, you get so much more out of just the video than you just do out of the audio podcast as well.
Yeah. By the time this drops, will the World Deer Expo, is that gone yet?
Yeah, it's next weekend.
Is this dropping next week?
Hold on. Let's look real quick. Let's look.
Well, we're going to be at the World Deer Expo.
No, it'll drop.
Okay, perfect.
We're there.
Perfect.
Talk about it. Let's go.
All right. Do you know our booth number?
Yeah, it's I just typed it out to somebody. Hold on. It is.
We're going to be at the World Deer Expo. We got a booth there.
Birmingham, Alabama. We're booth 2405, so 2,405. So 2405 is our booth number. Downstairs. We're downstairs, right next to Michael Perry. So if you
sharing a booth with him.
Yeah. Well, he's got his own booth. We're just having one big booth.
Yeah.
But we've got a booth next to Michael Perry downstairs. I think he's 2404, I believe.
Yeah.
Or 2406, one of the two, one of the ones next to us. I don't know.
Yeah.
Take your pick.
Just go wander around down there, you'll find us.
But listen, so I've had this idea. I want to put this on the podcast. So we're gonna be at the World Deer Expo, Birmingham, Alabama. It's like a 3-day event or 4-day event. The dates are. Let me look it up real quick. 1 second.
The World Deer Expo. It's like Thursday through Sunday, isn't it?
Yeah,
I think.
Let me confirm real quick. All right, so
July 21st through 23rd.
July 21st to 23rd, and this episode will come out on the 20th.
Perfect.
Yep.
Perfect.
So, guys, come out to the World Deer Expo. Come hang out with us and listen. So if you listen to an episode a couple weeks ago, we did a podcast style where we interviewed different guests at the Mobile Hunters Expo, different attendees that are all extremely successful whitetail hunters and got their tips. I want to do the same concept for the World Deer Expo, but I want to interview listeners. Okay?
Oh, interesting. So you're just throwing it out there.
Yes.
Okay.
So I want listeners to come by the booth, and I'm going to have a headset. I'm going to have the mic setups and everything. And I want to get what has been one of the most valuable piece of information you've learned from the podcast that is either impacted you in one way or the other. Maybe you haven't killed a deer with it, but it's impacted you as something that either it hit home for you, you've tried it and started seeing success, or maybe you even killed a buck doing so. I want to interview you guys at the World Deer Expo. So if you're coming to the World Deer Expo, come by the booth, stop and give me 5 to 10 minutes of your time, and I want to interview you on the podcast. And we're going to do a big podcast episode.
Or message us, too, like by the time you're hearing this. Maybe message and because I don't know what kind of response we'll get, but the more coordination, the better.
Y'all can stay in line. I don't care. I'll sit there and just like we'll run through everybody with the microphone. But feel free to come by, grab a mic, and then I just want to interview you. I want to get your thoughts on how long have you been listening to the show, and what has been a specific guest and topic or style or tactic that you've heard from the show from a guest that's directly impacted you. I want to interview you guys on the podcast, and we're going to put out a whole episode with all these different listeners on there. So super excited about it, and y'all come by. And I think we're going to have some decals to give out, right? We're going to have some stickers.
Free stickers.
Yeah, so come by and get you a Southern Outdoorsman decal, put on your truck.
Yeah,
so
buddy.
Then if I see you at a parking gate, and if I see it's a local public land, I'm like, okay, this guy's a good dude. I'm going to keep on rolling.
Then you won't let the air out of your tires if you got a
God.
If you got a Southern Outdoorsman sticker.
Oh, my God.
Free stickers, everybody. Come on.
Yeah, so come by the booth, hang out with us. It's going to be a super fun time.
Yeah, looking forward to it. It's going to be awesome.
And then also the next weekend, I'm going to be going to the Northern Show for the Mobile Hunters Expo in Kalamazoo, Michigan. That's going to be an awesome event. So if we have listeners, which I know we do, kind of in that Great Lakes area, if you're within 6 hours of Kalamazoo, I would highly, highly, highly recommend to come to the show. The Southern Show was unbelievable. I mean, it's an unbelievable opportunity for attendees and be able to talk to super successful whitetail hunters, be able to try so many different pieces of gear before the show before you actually have to purchase it. You can try it all at the show, figure out what's the best option for you, and then you can come hang out with me too because I won't be there. Andrew won't be able to make it, but I'll be there. I think we're going to help out a little bit more with the seminars up there, and it's going to be a great time. So again, if you're in that area within about 6 hours at Kalamazoo, it's a 3-day event. I would highly recommend you guys coming up for that. And I want to confirm the dates as well real quick. So the dates on the Northern Show is
the 28th.
It's the 28th, 29th, and 30th of July. So it's a Friday, Saturday, Sunday event. Saturday is the film festival. So if you attend the show Saturday, you can come and stop and watch the film festival, which starts at, I think it goes from, I think it's like 6 to 8 or 7 to 9, something like that in the evening.
Yep.
There's going to be beer. Great time. It was awesome last year in Ohio with the film festival, so I'm super excited to see some of the films from this year.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome. Let's do some Q&A.
Awesome. Okay, real quick. So, listeners, we've been trying to do these Q&As. We're kind of getting down. We got a couple, I think, left. If you go over to the Southern Outdoorsman website, again, thesouthernOutdoorsmen.com, and look at, there's a tab on there for Q&A. Fill out the Q&A form, and we're going to try to start answering those Q&As on all these different outro breakdown episodes.
Yep.
And also, I guess, can we have that in the show link the show notes?
Yeah, it's in the show notes in every episode, so you can go down to the show notes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen, and you'll see it down there. So you can go fill out that form and get your question answered on the show.
Yeah, I love doing this. It's super fun.
Yeah, it is fun.
The one last week was hilarious. Yeah, not hilarious, but it was interesting with the whole clear cut that was sprayed and everything. And
that was super interesting. I love doing this kind of stuff. It's so fun.
Yep.
All right, this is from Andrew Heflin. Hey guys, I'm a relatively recent follower of the podcast. I'm from Ohio and hunt Southern Ohio public land, but grew up hunting squirrel and turkey in Kentucky, where my family is from. Anyways, I recently listened to the podcast with Glenn Solomon and must say that along with the Bobby Worthington episodes, it was one of the best pieces of hunting content I've ever come across.
Episode 116, guys. Episode 116.
Yes, sir.
Glenn Solomon, anyway.
I imagine that finding men of that caliber is a serious task. Are there any other episodes that you feel are similar in terms of the knowledge of the guest, but also maybe not as well known throughout the Midwest? I will keep listening and wish you all the best. Stay Southern.
Okay, there we go.
So I actually ended up messaging this guy back a bunch of episode numbers, but I'm curious of what you come up with. Or a bunch of names of guests.
Number one, episode 141 with Josh Driver.
Yes.
To me, it applies
everywhere.
Anywhere in the country.
Everywhere.
Episode 141. If you listen to episode 141, if you listen and do what he says, you will have success this fall finding big bucks. Okay?
We got so many listener success stories from that.
Yeah, it was incredible.
Like, so many. Here's some names I gave him. I gave him quite a list.
Oh, okay.
All right. You can search any of these names on your listing platform and find the podcast we did with them. I wasn't able to get the episode numbers for every single one of them.
I'll look it up real quick. Hold
on.
All
right.
I'll look up Nathan.
Nathan Killen is one of them. He's a mountain hunter. We've done several podcasts with him, but one of the things that we focused on with him was basically targeting. Oh, I don't know if that's the right episode.
Here it's right here.
Okay, the Guide to Hunting Old Bucks with Nathan Killen. That's
episode
171.
Episode 171.
That one was a freaking great one because we're basically in there. If you're interested in hunting a mature buck versus just any buck, that's the kind of episode that you're going to want to listen to because Nathan really breaks down how it is really different. It's like hunting a different animal. And then also in episode 335, we had Finding Mature Bucks Postseason and Sheds with Nathan Killen and Rusty Johnson. So that's where we actually got those two on a podcast and let them talk. Kind of similar to this roundtable.
If you're a mountain hunter, that's really good episode.
That's the episode.
Really good episode.
Another one, Jim Forbes. He was another. That's kind of a blast from the past. That was probably 2020 when we interviewed him. I almost said when we emailed him. I don't know where that came from. That was episode 190 with Jim Forbes.
Episode 190, Mature Buck Habits, Stand Placement, and Terrain Rating with Jim Forbes. Episode 190. Must listen.
That one was a dandy. That's a real good one. Of course, Tony Myers is another one. We mentioned Tony a little bit earlier. He's a legend here in Alabama. He's killed a lot of really big deer. He's extremely successful doing it. That's episode 191, Early Season Mature Bucks and Old School Hunting with Tony Myers. Tony Myers is a good friend of Michael Perry's, and man, that guy gets after it. We also had him on with another guest recommendation on here, Jamie McKay, and that one was episode 263, How to Read Buck Sign and Find the Big Ones with Tony Myers. That one featured Michael Perry. I don't think Jamie was there, actually, was he?
No, he wasn't. No.
But Tony and Jamie and Michael Perry, they all know each other, and so they all hunt kind of similar, and getting them in a room together was really awesome. But Jamie McKay is another one that we've interviewed that he was just that was a really good interview. I know he was on episode 200. 200 with Michael Perry, Wes Moe, and Jamie McKay.
That's a good episode.
I forgot about that episode,
that's a banger.
Michael Perry, we've had Michael on numerous times. Again, if you just go search, Michael Perry, you'll see his episode.
Dude, look how many times he's been on.
No, he's been on a whole bunch of times. Just grab one. Which one do you think?
I want to do one. Here's a good one. That's from.
Oh yeah, honing in on the best funnels and creek crossings with Michael Perry. That's episode 260. That's a good one too. Troy Pottinger, episode 175. It was called Scrape Hunting Masterclass with Troy Pottinger. That one is a absolutely great deep dive on scrape hunting. If you're interested in scrape hunting, Troy is your guy.
Did you Licking Branch Magic? Greg Skufka. That's another banger.
Yeah.
Oh, did you put it on there?
No, I didn't.
Oh, we're gonna do that one next. So here's Richard Fott. Richard Fott's been on the podcast quite a few times as well.
Yep.
These aren't all of them. Let's see.
Creating Success with Richard Fott. That was a good one. No. Proven Tactic. Click on that one. Yep. Yeah. Episode 118. Creating Success with Richard Fott. That was we've done a couple with Richard, and man.
Oh, this is the most impactful one though.
Oh, yeah. Called Deer the Right Way with Richard Fott, episode 290. I think that's our most downloaded episode.
Yeah, if you're wanting, one of the most in-depth conversations on calling whitetails using rattling and grunting, episode 290, Calling Deer the Right Way with Richard Fott, is a unbelievable episode. We had unbelievable, maybe close to 100 listener success stories that came from just that episode.
Quick, too, because that episode hit at just the right time.
In October.
As well. In October, right there leading up to the rut. And, dude, people were just laying the wood to them.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
Scott Seals. Scott's been on a couple times here lately. Andrew, I'm assuming you probably heard Scott on here already if you've been listening relatively recently.
That's the first one.
But the first one we did with him was episode 428, which was Targeting Bucks No One Else Can Get with Scott Seals and Nick Harris. Scott and Nick, man, those guys are studs and they get it done. So that was a really good one. And then another one is Mastering Hill Country Feed Trees with Scott Seals. That was episode 486. So that was the recent one that we referenced earlier in this podcast. Wes Moe. Wes, he's been a buddy of ours since probably 2019, I think was the first time we interviewed him. And he's the one that does the Wolfpack tactic. So if your thing is you want to get a group of buddies and you want to go out there and work together, that's what Wes kind of specializes in. And our first episode we did with him was episode 146, Killing Pressured Whitetails with Wes Moe. That one was really focused on the Wolfpack tactic, but then also Targeting Big Buck Escape Routes with Wes Moe. That's episode 189. That's another one on that subject, and that's what Wes does, and he does a really good job at it. Him and his group kind of get together, and they essentially surround a buck, and someone's going to end up killing it because it's going to come squirting out of that bedding area one way or another, and they've got people covering those exit routes. And we talk a lot about honing in on those escape routes and how to hunt those, and that's something that can be applied even if you're not hunting with a group of people that you know. Say you take a gun day on a wildlife management area here in the South where the Orange Army's out there, you can use those same principles and set up on those escape routes and, just have random people pushing deer around. And if you're on the right escape route, you've got a really good chance at having a big buck come by you. Chuck Young, episodes 390 and 384 were with him. Chuck is an Arkansas guy, another mountain hunter. We talked a lot about, I think, morning hunting with him, like in the mountains.
But
a lot of very interesting terrain feature and thermal talk. He had a lot of interesting thoughts on thermals. A lot of listener success stories came from his episode as well.
Oh, sorry.
And then Adam and Heath Jolly. We've had Adam Jolly on. I don't remember the first time. It was a while back, like in the hundreds. But we had Adam and his brother Heath on for episode 378 and 380. We did a series with them, and it's all about. It's another one that if you're interested in early season hunting and feed trees and buck bedding specifically, those are your episodes, because that's really what their bread and butter is targeting those buck bedding areas in early season, and they're in Virginia, I think.
No, North Carolina.
North Carolina, but they're hunting the Appalachian Mountains. So again, if you're a mountain guy, that one's going to be right up your alley. But also, that a lot of the principles of what they talk about can be applied really anywhere.
Here's the first one we had Adam on.
Outsmarting Mature Bucks with Adam Jolly, episode 135. That one's a really good one.
So he killed a huge 13-point on a morning sit early season. He talks about how much he loves, and maybe we need to do another episode with him about early season.
That's what I'm saying.
How much he loves like late September, early October hunting mornings for mature bucks, catching them in their beds. Like it is like the hunting bee style tactics, but in the mountains. Yeah. He's been doing it for a while.
Yeah, if that's your jam, you need to go listen to that episode. Tom Brownlee, episode 315. That one's called The Truth About Scent with Tom Brownlee. Tom is basically a scientist. Like, what would you call him? Like, he's a researcher. And the entire thing is about scent and basically the science of scent. He uses canines for a lot of his research.
He's a national renowned canine instructor.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it's an unbelievable episode. Like, you want the most in-depth conversation you've ever heard about scent and ground scent and like how that actually works and how long, especially ground disturbance, can last. Episode 315 is an unbelievable episode for that.
Yeah.
Now, the last one is Travis Murray that you've got written down. We've had him on quite a few times. There's 3 episodes that you've got note on. So the first one's episode 210, ghillie suit ground hunting in a buck's bedroom with Travis Murray.
Yep.
The second one, which we had him on just a week or two later, is episode 213, understanding a killing wind while targeting mature bucks with Travis Murray. We've had a lot of listener success stories come from episode 213 with Travis.
Oh, a bunch.
Using a killing wind, it's like that off wind, and it's unbelievable. If you're a rifle hunter, if you're a bow hunter, it works extremely well. If you're a rifle hunter, it is extremely, extremely deadly, and he talks about that in great detail in that episode.
Yep.
Also with Travis Murray, an extremely important one. This is what's helped Travis back when he used to use trail cameras. He had unbelievable success killing some monster whitetails in Mississippi. His biggest one grossed over 200 inches. And the episode is it's episode 257. Again, episode 257, Trolling for Monster Bucks with Travis Murray.
That's a great one to listen to this time of year, especially.
Yeah, especially because he has a really good trail cam strategy that he used to do. He was so effective with it. It got boring for him. He literally stopped
using. What an awesome problem to have.
He literally stopped using trail cameras because it was working out so well for him that it took the adventure away from hunting whitetails and not knowing what's out there. So he stopped using them after using them for, I guess, a handful of years. So again, episode 257, highly recommend listening to that. And also another one that we had Travis on, which is a really good one about woodsmanship. This is last August, and it's episode 398, Becoming a True Woodsman with Travis Murray. And he talks about, in that episode, which is a really good episode, especially if you're a newer hunter, or if you're not a newer hunter, how valuable a hunting skill set of slip hunting for squirrels can add to unbelievable woodsmanship, and how you can use that to scout your way back into spots to find big whitetails.
Yep. All right. That was a very, very long-winded answer. But, we actually get a lot of questions about that, and people have asked about getting some kind of directory for, like, our podcast library where it's like, hey, these episodes are for your mountain guys. These episodes are for your swamp guys. These are scent episodes. These are scrape episodes. These are rut episodes.
Hill country,
and,
flatlands.
Gosh, I want to do that so bad. There are not enough hours in the day because that is a big project. But we do want to do something like that eventually, so stay tuned. Hopefully there will be that in the future. This is our last Q&A. Mac Duncan said, "What are you looking for in large blocks of pines mixed with cutovers?" Jacob, I'll let you start.
SMZs. Number one. So, large block of pines with clear cuts. So, this is from two perspectives, bow hunting and rifle hunting. If you have clear cuts, especially clear cut, if you're in the deep south, and if it's under 3 to 4 years of age, you can rifle hunt those amazingly. If you can climb really high around the edge of the clear cut and find, the thing to find is a high spot over the top of the clear cut, if you're in kind of hill country, looking into some kind of like slight low spot in the clear cut, not necessarily an SMZ, but like a slight draw where they've cut all the way across it. Those low spots, for whatever reason, it seems like the bucks will bed just on the edges of those low spots that's been clear cut all the way across. And if you get up high, you can kind of watch those. It's a great spot not only catch bucks bedded, but also catch bucks traveling through those little low spots in the clear cut. In addition to that is SMZ, streamside management zones, the little hardwood drainages in and around those clear cuts and in and around those pines. That's where you're going to find your feed trees, and also a really good travel point to find buck cruising in, along with finding excellent locations for putting either community scrapes like a mock scrape in, or finding community scrapes in the bottom of those hubs. So if you have, again, a creek system running through this property, even if it's fairly flat, if you have 3 or 4 of these little drainages, these SMZs that drop down to this creek bottom, to that low spot, that's going to be an excellent thermal hub to find community scrapes, put in a mock scrape, and also hunt specifically those locations. Again, that's an area like we hunted last year on our SOA hunt in Alabama, where we saw a huge whitetail, a really big whitetail, and also me and Andrew killed 2 bucks in that same spot the following day. So those are fantastic, but what's your thoughts on it?
If you have some larger cutovers on the place, I'd be looking to hunt the cutovers with a rifle, but I'd also be looking for terrain features within those cutovers. So, like you said, maybe a low spot that could be like a thermal hub. One spot that comes to mind is where you killed your bucks in that cutover on our local WMA. That particular spot, that cutover kind of slopes down a steep hill and then benches out and then drops off to the creek. So there's a very nice bench that wrapped around that cutover, which that cutover's aged out now, can't really hunt it anymore. But back then, when it was like that 3 or 4 year old, tall sage grass, dude, they were in there thick, and you killed 2 bucks out of that. You killed one really nice buck out of it.
Yep.
And so I'd be looking for something like that, terrain features within that cutover that are going to funnel deer, and then pretty much exactly what Jacob said, like those hubs that come out into it. Or one thing that I really like to find too is if you have a larger cutover and you have one large drainage coming out of that cutover, and being able to hunt the mouth of that. I've had really good luck in spots like that as well, even just going in blind where you've got a bunch of thick cover. And this is especially good when that cutover starts to age out a little bit and it's harder to hunt it with a rifle because you can't get high enough to see down into it anymore. There's too many saplings or just whatever. You can't shoot down into it. But there's drainages coming out of that cutover, hitting those larger creek drainages or SMZs, and hunting at the mouth of that, because deer will hit that drainage within the cutover and walk it out, and they'll use it as a travel corridor. And you're going to catch deer running the edge of that cutover. So you're getting travel coming down out of the cutover and running the edge of the cutover as well. And that's also another spot where you'll potentially find some deer bedded, kind of monitoring those routes, and it's a good scrape location. So that'd be my advice.
Yep.
Sounds like a good situation.
Yep.
I like it.
I love it.
Love it.
Sweet. We got a new review.
Oh, yeah, we do. Yeah.
So to kind of wrap up that Q&A session, again, guys, we love getting these Q&As. Again, just go over to the Southern Outdoorsman website. You can fill out the Q&A form, or go down the show description down below on this podcast episode, and you'll be able to click the link down there and just fill out your questions, and we'll get those answered on the podcast.
Dadgummit.
Dude, your phone's janky, dude.
You done locked it. Okay, there you go.
All right. So this is from, clearly this guy's from Arkansas. This is a 5-star review titled Dopest Dope. Go Hog, and this is from Go Hogs 35. This show is, it's not, it should be this show is dopest dope I've ever smoked. Love the content. Keep up the good work, guys. Been listening for a couple years now. Long-time listener, first-time reviewer.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right. This is from Triple F Outdoors, East Texas Stump Jumper, 5 stars. I'm a long-time listener from Southeast Texas. I have been on the train since episode 100. Best podcast that pertains to what every Southerner hunts from swamps to hill country. Keep up the good work, and I'm ready for season to get here and to pick all my gear back up like a good day yard selling. That is a... Hey, listen, only the real ones know that joke, man. Only the people who've been listening for a while know that. Had a good day yard selling. Oh, man, we need to rehash that one of these days.
The Geraldine Baptist
Archery Club.
God,
we need to figure out what episode that is.
Yeah, that's one of the funniest outros you'll ever hear.
Yep. Oh, for sure. That came from our buddy Tyler Malone seeing a black bear.
You know, it's funny. I was listening to that episode again after we recorded when it was posted.
Uh-huh.
I was going to a funeral, listening to it, and I could not stop laughing. That's how funny that episode is. Okay.
Oh my gosh.
Yep. Good stuff.
That's a good episode.
Really good. But anyway, so
get out of here, bear.
Get out of here, bear.
Shoo.
I'm telling you, man. Good day yard selling. So again, we just read off reviews. That's from Apple Podcasts, guys. So if you're per our analytics, roughly 75% of you guys listen on Apple products. So if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, go leave us a 5-star written review, and again, we'll read off those as we get those in on the outro episodes on these episodes. So we appreciate all that feedback. Appreciate y'all helping us get over 1,000 reviews on Apple Podcasts. Y'all are freaking awesome, and love reading the new reviews. So we haven't heard from Big Buck Nuts and Thicket Cricket.
Yeah, we
haven't heard from any of those guys in a while. There's the two long time reviewers.
I hope they're okay.
I hope they're okay. Yeah,
they need to message us so we can send them some free stickers.
Yep.
So, anyways, y'all message us. We'll get you some stickers.
By the way, we got some merch back up on the website, right?
No
shirts. You don't have any shirts?
I mean, we're like almost sold out of shirts.
Well, that's fine. Oh,
very close to being sold out of shirts.
So if you want to go over to the Southern Outdoorsman website, there's a few shirts left, guys. Some of our OG Southern Outdoorsman shirts.
Yep.
You can go pick those up. We just had a couple people, a couple listeners purchase those recently. So super excited and working on some other designs right now, guys. So hopefully by sometime later this summer, we'll have some new merch coming in. If not late summer, it'll be early fall, and we'd love to see y'all support there. So
yeah, buddy.
Appreciate y'all listening, and listen. Don't miss Monday's episode, guys. Got some more bangers coming out. Make sure you're watching the podcast on YouTube. Share it with a buddy. If you enjoyed the podcast, share it with a buddy. And we'll catch you back here for the next week's episode from the Southern Outdoorsman Podcast.